everyone, I am Sonal Bhatt and today we are going to deal with the very first chapter in geography, which is nothing but it is resources and development. So let's get started and do the entire chapter, right? So now children, what do you mean by a resource? Everything which is available in our environment can be used to satisfy our needs, and once I use those things, it can be termed as a resource. Now, what can be the things? It can be soil, it can be air, it can be water, it can be sunlight. So all these three things are easily available in the environment, right? But they need to satisfy three main conditions, and the three conditions are technologically accessible, that's the first one. So what do you mean by technologically accessible? Now, to use the solar light provided by sun, correct? It is sunlight. I have these solar panels which can be further used to develop electricity or to heat water in my house, correct? So I am going to use this technology of solar panels. That means to use solar energy to generate or heat water in my house or anywhere else, the technology of solar panel is needed. Second condition is it needs to be economically feasible. Now what do you mean by economically feasible? Economy is nothing but it's about budget. It should be budget friendly. If it fits into my budget and I can buy it, or I can spend a particular amount for development of this technology or installation of these kind of technologies for my own benefit, I can use that resource easily. Example, these solar panels. Now these solar panels are very economically friendly. That means it fits into my budget and I can use them to heat water, right? And the third condition is culturally acceptable. Now what if on the entire road in a particular village or maybe in an urban area, instead of putting the electricity used by hydro generation or by any other mode, if these solar panels are put up, light comes from the sun and the electricity gets converted and these all lamps gets lit up, right? So it is culturally acceptable. There is low maintenance towards maintaining all these solar panels. So it should be culturally acceptable. So what is a resource finally? Everything which is available in the nature which can be used to satisfy your needs and my needs, provided it is technologically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable. Clear children? Now let's go forward and try to understand that the process of transformation of the things which are available in the environment, it involves an interdependent relationship between nature, technology and institution. Now what do you mean by nature? Nature is whatever is available, that's our environment. It is about the technology. You remember the solar panel example which I gave you? So here it is about farming, right? And what do you mean by institutions then? Institution is a place or it is a group of people who come together and try to manage and organize the things which are done. So farming cannot be done by a single person on a large land. So there are people who comes forward. The institutions of farming provides you best quality of seeds like Krushi Udyog, we all are aware about, right? So for these things, there's one person or one identity which is very important, and they are no one else than humans. So human beings interact with the nature through the technology, create institution, and you get the economic development, that is farming. Now farming is for our own growth. We all need food to eat, right? So humans will make sure that they farm with the help of institutions in the nature with the help of technology like tractors, correct? Now let's go forward and try to understand that the resources are a function of human activities. Obviously yes, we need to do it. So it is about us who does it, correct? For example, let's take this iron ore. Now iron ore is easily available in the environment. We do mining and we get the iron ore, right? But I cannot directly use this rock of iron ore for my own benefit. I cannot build buildings with the help of iron ore. What do I need? There is a process to extract the iron from this iron ore, which is raw iron, and get converted into the iron rods. And then I can use at different places for my own benefit. So this becomes a resource, correct? Now, let's go ahead. Human beings. What are human beings? Human beings themselves are essential components of the resources. They are very essential. They are a resource themselves, right? They are going to transform any other material which is available in the nature into a product which they can use. Example, from this rubber tree, the rubber which we get gets converted into the rubber chappals, tires, rubber bands and all small stuff which they can use for their own purpose, right? So human beings themselves are the essential component for a resource. Now, read this slide. I'll give you 10 seconds. Go through this and then we'll go forward. Alright, so I hope you have gone through this slide, right? So everything which is available in the environment, which can be put to our use through technologically accessible, economically feasible and culturally acceptable, can be termed as a resource. You also have an interdependent relationship between nature, technology and institutions, right? So let's move ahead, children. Now, we also need to classify the resources which are available. Now, there are 4 main categories of classification. The very first category is the origin, right? The second category is exhaustibility, then comes ownership, and then finally comes status of development. We will be looking one category at a time and we'll be looking them into detail. So the first bifurcation in the origin is biotic. So what is biotic? Alright, so when we are talking about biotic, so biotic is nothing but which has life in the biosphere. We are already living on this earth. It's a biosphere where the life is there. So anything which is alive can be termed as biotic. Example, human beings. So they are biotic. Now let's go to the second category in the origin, which is abiotic, right? So what is abiotic? It is opposite of biotic. Anything which is non-living can be termed as abiotic. Example, rocks. Rocks don't have life, isn't it? We have metals. They don't have life. So these can be termed as abiotic. Let's go to the second main classification, which is exhaustibility. And what do you mean by exhaustibility, children? Exhaustibility means something which gets exhausted. It gets finished. Alright, जो खत्म हो जाता है. Alright, तो उसमें भी there are 2 different types. The first type is renewable and the second type is non-renewable. Let's go to the renewable and try to understand that anything which can be reused, correct? Anything which can be reused by doing a particular process on it can be termed as renewable. Example, we can have some examples like solar and wind energy, correct? You can reuse it again and again and it is also renewable, right? Now, we have water. It is also a renewable resource, correct? We have forest and wildlife. It is also a renewable resource. हम उसको घड़ी घड़ी यूज कर सकते हैं अगर खत्म हो गया तो. For example, chicken lays eggs, right? आज egg दिया, खत्म egg हो गया हमारा, right? Tomorrow again the chickens are going to lay eggs. So it is renewable, right? Now, these renewable resources can again be classified into 2 different types. One is continuous and flow. What do you mean by continuous? जो होते रहता है, एक flow है which continuously happens, right? जैसे wind है, हवा चलने ही वाली है, पानी बहने ही वाला है. It is continuous, correct? And the second category is biological. Again biological, it becomes about the biotic factors such as natural vegetation and wildlife. आज पेड़ उगे हैं, कल कट गए, फिर से उग जाएंगे, correct? Even wildlife, animals die and take birth. The cycle goes on like this. So it is renewable. Let's go ahead and now try to understand what are non-renewable resources. So we have already done renewable, right? जो वापस से हम उसको renew करके use कर सकते हैं वो. So what will be non-renewable? जो हम उसको वापस से use नहीं कर सकते हैं वो. It's a totally opposite version, right? Now let's take an example of fossil fuels, minerals, petrol. These things which are there on the earth, once it finishes up, we cannot have them again very soon. They are going to take a long time to regenerate themselves. So those things can be termed under non-renewable resources. Examples I have just told you, isn't it? Minerals and fossil fuels. These resources are going to take millions and billion years to regenerate themselves. Now, we also have some resources which are recyclable. What do you mean by recyclable? Correct? Such as iron ore. ठीक है, आयरन. अब आयरन ओर तो हमको मिलने वाला है. आयरन ओर से हमने आयरन को एक्सट्रैक्ट कर लिया, उसके मेटल रॉड्स बना लिए और हमने उससे कोई एक प्रोडक्ट बना लिया है. करेक्ट? आयरन तो हमारे अर्थ से खत्म हो जाएगा स्लोली एंड ग्रेजुअली, बट ये जो हमारे पास रेडी फॉर्म ऑफ आयरन है, आई कैन मेल्ट इट अगेन एंड रीयूज इट. करेक्ट? एग्जाम्पल ज्वेलरीज. हमारी ज्वेलरीज भी हम उसको रीमोल्ड करके सेकेंड अनदर डिजाइन में कन्वर्ट करके हम उसको पहन सकते हैं. दो इट इज एन रिसोर्स विच गेट्स एग्जॉस्टेड, बट हम उसको वापस रिसाइकल करके यूज कर सकते हैं. Isn't it? That's the human power. We use our brains to do that. Now, these fossil fuels cannot be regenerated. पेट्रोल खत्म हो जाएगा तो पेट्रोल नहीं बनेगा, बट आयरन ओर से आयरन को हम एक्सट्रैक्ट करके रिसाइकल करके कहीं और उसको यूज कर सकते हैं. गॉट इट? सो रिसाइकल अलग, टोटली अलग है. वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट. नाउ once we go ahead, we need to understand that the resources can also be classified on the basis of ownership. Now, what do you mean by ownership? I own this pen or I own a book. That's a ownership. It's mine. So, this ownership also can be divided into 4 different categories. The first one is individual, we have community, we have national, and we have international. Now, let's see all these classifications in detail. Let's see the individual ones. So what is individual? It is a privately owned property. I can own a house, isn't it? Farmers can own farming lands, correct? They are going to generate revenue for themselves. Even they have a group and then they can own a farming land. Apart from that, in the urban areas, we have different plots which we own. We can now have farming there, we can have a pond there that will be privately owned, we can build a house there that will be privately owned, right? So examples would be even plantations. I have a particular boundary of land which I have purchased, it's on my name, and whatever plantation is done there and whatever products I sell from that plantation, it's going to be mine. The money or the revenue generated, it's going to be mine. So that is an individual resource. The land becomes the individual resource which is used for plantation. We can also have pasture lands, isn't it? We can also have ponds. मेरी बाउंड्री में अगर एक छोटा पॉन्ड बना है तो वो मेरा है. I own that pond. Got it? I can also have a well in my own land. गांव में होते हैं ना हर घर के लिए एक सेपरेट कुआं. Correct? So that is like a private property. Now we also have classification of any resource based on community ownership. Now what do you mean by community ownership? Group of people coming together to form a particular community. Let's say we have different communities like Catholics, we have Hindus, we have Muslims, we have different communities and we have different resources which are being used by them. Let's give examples. We have our own worship places, right? So we have churches, we have mandirs, we have masjids and so on and on. Correct? Similarly, that resources built by the community are accessible to one and all. From the community also and from the different community also. Correct? We also have village commons. Now what are known as village commons? अगर एक गांव है, a particular village, let's say Pune, right? It's a city, but then we have a boundary, right? So any resources between that area can be used by people residing in that village or city, right? Example, the grazing grounds, we have burial grounds, we have village ponds. True? So any villagers residing in that village can use those resources. Apart from that, in the urban areas, we have parks, isn't it? Where children go and play. So that's a community park. We have picnic spots, isn't it? We also have playgrounds where each and every individual residing in that area can go and use it. It's a resource based for community. किसी भी private individual का उस जगह पे कोई हक नहीं है. हर इंसान उसको freely use कर सकता है. So that we need to understand. That's the main point for community. Now, let's go ahead and try to understand what do you mean by a national ownership. Ownership है जो individual नहीं है, जो community नहीं है, उससे एक level ऊपर है, जो national है, nation है. Now, which is our nation, children? India, right? तो India का national resources, अलग अलग resources, national resources क्या क्या हो सकते हैं? So we have mountains, we have rivers, we have oceans. All these resources become our national resources. Let us go in detail and understand. Now, national resources belongs to the nation, as I told you. Every country has a legal power to take away any individual property for not any individual's growth, but for the nation's growth. That's very important. Any nation has a power to take away any legal property which is owned by an individual or by a community for the growth of the nation, right? For the public good. Now we also have national properties such as roads, canals, isn't it? Railways, roadways. Now ये सब चीजें मेरी या तुम्हारी नहीं है, ये हम सबकी है. It is national. It is belonging to the Indian government. So it is belonging to the nation, a national ownership, right? As I told you, roads, railways and canals. Now let's go ahead and try to understand other national resources. इंडिया की बाउंड्री में जितने भी मिनरल्स मिलेंगे वो नेशनल रिसोर्स हैं किसके? इंडिया के. तो वो हो गया मिनरल्स, करेक्ट. वाटर रिसोर्सेज भी हो गया. इंडिया के अंदर बहने वाली नदी किसका हक है? इंडियंस का हक है, करेक्ट. सो दो गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया विल डिसाइड हाउ एंड किस तरीके से उस नदी के पानी को यूज करना चाहिए, राइट. वी ऑल्सो हैव फॉरेस्ट्स, we also have deserts, we also have wildlife, isn't it? We have lands, different lands and the ocean. Yes, let's understand this oceanic boundary. Agar hum, if we see the India map, children, from the India map, from the border of the India, right, if we go inside the sea up to a particular kilometers, that is 12 nautical miles. Now what do you mean by nautical miles? It is just a tool of measurement or let's say a unit of measurement specifically which is used to measure the boundary in water or in air. So एक particular location तक 12 nautical miles तक अगर हम अंदर जाते हैं, दरिया के अंदर जाते हैं, तो वो भारत की टेरिटरी में आने वाला है. तो वहाँ तक के जो कोई भी रिसोर्सेज हैं, जैसे फिशिंग हो गया या ट्रांसपोर्ट हो गया, तो वो सब हमारे इंडियन गवर्नमेंट के लॉज के अंडर आएगा. पर अगर हमने उस बाउंड्री को क्रॉस कर दिया तो वो कुछ और हो जाएगा, वो इंडिया के अंडर नहीं आएगा. यू गेट माई पॉइंट. सो इवन इन द ओशन, इंडिया इज सराउंडेड बाय वाटर, वी ऑल नो दैट, राइट. तो जब हम दरिया के अंदर जाएंगे तो एक 12 नॉटिकल माइल्स तक हर जगह पे हमारा नेशनल बाउंड्री रहेगा पानी का. वहां पे किसी भी जहाज को अंदर आने के लिए इंडियन गवर्नमेंट की परमिशन लगेगी. दैट्स कॉल्ड एज अ वाटर रिसोर्स, national. Now let's go and understand what do you mean by international resource. Obviously जो individual नहीं है, जो community नहीं है और जो national नहीं है, अगर ये तीनों नहीं है तो obviously वो एक international resource है. So what do you mean by international resource? Yes, so international resources can be regulated by some institutions. Alright, so let's understand about the oceanic resource. जैसे कि हमने 200 किलोमीटर्स ओशन के अंदर हम गए, उसके बियॉन्ड, उसके बाहर एक किसी भी कंट्री का अधिकार नहीं होगा. No country can claim a right to own a particular resource from that area, that is 200 kilometers away from the land boundary in the water. Then comes the international resources. There are institutions which come together, form an international institution which regulates the functionality of the water in that area. Correct? As I told you all this. Now let's understand the status of development. What do you mean by status of development? We have two parts here. We have potential, we have developed, also we have stock, and we have reserves. Let us understand each and every status of development one by one. The first one is potential. Now what are potential resources, children? Resources which are found in region but have not been utilized. मतलब ध्यान से समझना है, resources है, उधर ही है, पर हम उसको अच्छे से यूज नहीं कर रहे हैं. सिंपल एग्जाम्पल, अगर हम इंडिया में वेस्ट साइड पे जाते हैं, वी हैव गॉट टू स्टेट्स देयर, वी हैव गॉट राजस्थान एंड वी हैव गॉट गुजरात. वेस्टर्ली विंड्स बहुत है वहाँ पे, बहुत ही ज़्यादा हवा का बहाव है वहाँ पे, राइट? वी ऑल नो दैट विच इज़ ऑलरेडी फ्रीली अवेलेबल. तो वहाँ पे हमको सबसे अच्छा और सबसे ज़्यादा विंड और सोलार एनर्जी मिल सकता है. बट हम उस एरिया के उस फ्री अवेलेबल रिसोर्स को ठीक तरीके से यूज नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. सो दैट बिकम्स आर पोटेंशियल रिसोर्स. पोटेंशियल नहीं है हमारे पास वो करने के लिए. गॉट इट? नाउ लेट्स गो एंड अंडरस्टैंड द डेवलप्ड. थोड़ा अलग है. अब डेवलप्ड क्या है? जैसे कि हमारे पास वो रिसोर्सेज हैं और हम उसको अच्छी तरीके से हमारे ज़रूरत के हिसाब से यूज़ कर रहे हैं. दैट इज डेवलप्ड. एग्जाम्पल, माइनिंग है हमारा, अच्छे से हम माइनिंग कर रहे हैं, जितना ज़रूरी है उतना हम वहाँ से फ्यूल्स वगैरह सब ले रहे हैं, राइट? सो द डेवलपमेंट ऑफ रिसोर्सेज डिपेंड्स ऑन द टेक्नोलॉजी एंड द लेवल ऑफ देयर फीजिबिलिटी. जितना है उतना हम हमारे हिसाब से यूज़ कर रहे हैं. दैट इज डेवलप्ड. तो स्टॉक क्या होगा? ठीक है, पोटेंशियल भी समझ लिया, डेवलप भी समझ लिया, तो स्टॉक क्या है? स्टॉक मीन सिंपल, हमारे पास जो है. सो मटीरियल इन द एनवायरमेंट है हमारे पास, पानी हमारे पास है, वो हमारी जरूरियात को सेटिस्फाई कर सकता है. बहुत सारा स्टॉक है पानी का, है ना? ये नेचर में सबसे ज्यादा क्या है? पानी है. अब पानी को किस तरीके से यूज करना है वो किसका काम है? हमारा काम है, राइट? सो द ह्यूमंस हैव द एक्सेस, बट somewhere down the line we are not able to use them for our benefit to the fullest. Example, what is water made up of? H2O, 2 molecules of hydrogen and 1 molecule of oxygen. But उसमें से हम अलग अलग एनर्जी डेवलप कर सकते हैं, पर हम वो कर नहीं पा रहे हैं. Why aren't we able to do it? Because we don't have the technology to access this resource. You remember the definition of resources? It should be technologically accessible. राइट? यहाँ पे इस रिसोर्स को हम टेक्नोलॉजिकली एक्सेस नहीं कर पा रहे हैं. सो दिस वाटर गोज इनटू व्हाट? इट गोज इनटू अ स्टॉक रिसोर्स. लेट्स गो अहेड एंड ट्राई एंड अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय अ रिजर्व. अगेन वेरी सिंपल, स्टॉक और रिजर्व एक दूसरे से बहुत कनेक्टेड हैं. रिजर्व कैसा है ना, स्टॉक का एक सबसेट है. इट्स अ सब पार्ट ऑफ द स्टॉक. रिजर्व्स इज समथिंग विच वी हैव केप्ट फॉर आवर फ्यूचर जनरेशन. पानी है, नदियों में पानी है जो बहता है, रिवर्स, राइट? द वाटर इज फ्लोइंग इन द रिवर्स. वी हैव ऑल्सो बिल्ड अप डैम्स. नाउ व्हाई डू वी बिल्ड डैम्स? जब सूखा पड़ेगा, व्हेन वी हैव ड्राई एरियाज, दैट टाइम वी लीव द वाटर एंड द वाटर इज रीच टू द डिफरेंट पार्ट्स ऑफ द कंट्री. करेक्ट? बट not only that, with the help of those dams and water, we can also generate electricity. But we don't do that. We don't do it with all the dams. Why don't we do it? Because we don't need it as of now. The electricity is full-fledged used all over the nation and still it is satisfying all our needs. अगर ज़रूरत पड़ी तो हम इस डैम के पानी से इलेक्ट्रिसिटी, हाइड्रो इलेक्ट्रिसिटी जनरेट करके हम यूज कर सकते हैं. सो इट्स अ रिजर्व, राइट? सो रिजर्व एंड स्टॉक. रिजर्व इज अ सब पार्ट ऑफ द स्टॉक. Clear? Children, you all make mistakes in the stock and reserves. So try to understand this very clearly. Reserve is a sub part of the stock. हमारे पास है, टेक्नोलॉजी भी है, जब मन करेगा, जरूरत होगी, हम उसको यूज करेंगे. Clear? Now, as I have told you all this, we can use all this water. Let us understand how did we classify all our resources. Let's take a quick recap. We can classify on the basis of origin, it is biotic and abiotic. We can have exhaustibility, we have renewable, non-renewable, we have ownership, we have got 4 parts, individual, community, national, international, and we have the status of development. We have potential stock resources, we have developed, we have stocks, and we have reserves. Correct? Now, let's go ahead and do a 4-mark question, which is nothing but explain the resources which is based on their state of development. It comes for 2 to 4 marks, depends on how the question is. Read this slide and then we'll quickly move forward. Time up, children. I hope you all have revised this. Now, let's go ahead and try to understand the main concept of development of resources. Now, what do you mean by development? Resources हैं, use भी कर रहे हैं, ज़रूरत है, सब चल रहा है अच्छे से, तो develop क्यों करना है? चलो देखते हैं develop क्यों करना है. Resources are vital for human survival as well as for maintaining the quality of life. अगर अभी मुझे कार से चलने की आदत हो गई है, तो I should make sure that I earn enough to refill the fuel again and again in my car to maintain my standard of living. This is a very individual example. Broaden this example and try to think of a nation or maybe as a globe, as a global crisis. Resources खत्म हो जाएंगे तो हम हमारा लाइफ मेंटेन नहीं कर पाएंगे. तो उस चीज को ध्यान में रखते हुए हमें चेक करना है. वी शुड चेक दैट हाउ टू यूज आवर रिसोर्सेज, राइट? इट इज बिलीव दैट द रिसोर्सेज आर फ्री गिफ्ट्स ऑफ नेचर. करेक्ट? सो as a result, human beings use them indiscriminately and led to the following major problems. Deforestation सबसे बड़ा problem, depletion of resources. Correct? Deforestation हो गया, water को हमने ये कर दिया है, pollute कर दिया है, तो अब वो पानी पीने लायक नहीं रहा है. Example, river Ganges, we have seen recently, right? How polluted we have done. So we are not able to use that resource. Because of the global warming, we have got the glaciers which are melting and we all know the crisis, isn't it? Everyone is aware of it. The depletion of the ozone layer, गर्मी बढ़ गई है. Correct? We have the environmental pollution, plastics, all non-recyclable resources जिसको हमने use कर करके dump कर दिया है. Isn't it? The dump yards are more larger than the mountains on the earth. The land degradation. So, a very important concept. What do you mean by land degradation? It is related to farming. We keep farming. There's a particular way of farming the land, right? We always keep rotating the crops. But nowadays, it is not being done properly. So, the land gets degraded. पानी नहीं मिल रहा है, lights को अच्छे से use नहीं किया है, farming ठीक से नहीं हो रही है ना? Salt content बढ़ गया है, तो land degrade हो गई. Obviously, अब आगे चल के problems होंगे. So that is land degradation. Distribution of resources. किसी के पास कम, किसी के पास ज़्यादा. Some people have more resources, some people have less resources. Obviously, the status of the people comes into the picture, right? Apart from that, we also need to understand that our entire planning of the resource will lead to a sustainable life. Sustain करना तो ज़रूरी है ना दुनिया में. तो we need to understand that all the resources should be maintained in such a manner that we can sustain ourselves on the globe for a longer period of time. Sustainable existence is a component of sustainable development. This statement is very important, children. We need to make sure that we write this statement in the exam so that we gain more points. Correct? Now, apart from that, it also helps in the development of the globe. For example, if I want to build a bridge, I should make sure that it does not hamper my future generation and also it doesn't hamper the resources which are already available. If I am building up a factory, I should make sure that the waste doesn't flow in the water and I should not pollute the river there, right? I should have a proper waste management along with the build-up of my factory. So all the things should be such a way that it is sustained and it is for the sustainable economic growth of the people in the On the globe, not in the nation, it's about on the globe. Right? So now let's revise this. Quickly go through this slide, children. Alright, superb. So we end this lecture here today. Alright, and I'll be back with the next part of this chapter in my next video. Till that time, you can subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon. Remember, my name is Sonal Bhatt. Till then, bye-bye. Take care.